Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present, I guess, the early stages of our work together. We're going to be presenting a case study to you of an experiment that we conducted over 3 days in November and December last year when Emilie was a visiting fellow of this scheme, CVC, Cambridge Visual Culture. And Emilie had written to us earlier in the year with a proposal to work with us on looking at multisensory approaches to book exhibitions. We were thrilled to receive her approach because it really gave us the opportunity to galvanise and deepen work that we were already doing. And you'll see on the slide the names, our names, and then the other people who were involved, which gives you, again, a sense of the interdisciplinarity of what we were trying to do. Georgia is a PhD student working on the history of smell in literature, in Persian literature. David Farrell-Banks is a researcher in participatory practice, and Monika Stokowiec is our book and manuscripts conservator, and everyone was crucial to making the experiment work.
All right, so I'm going to start with the starting points where we... just scoot over. It's just too heavy. I'm lazy. I'm going to start with a few starting points. So the first thing that I think we need discussion is the problem of the book, what the museum does to the book. And Mérès and Desvallées have been kind of working on this concept of musealization. And they define it as the operation that tends to conceptually and physically extract an object from its original natural or cultural environment and to give it a museum status, to transform it into a museum or musealier, a museum object, that is to make it easy, to make it enter the realm of the museum. The problem is when an object enters the realm of the museum, it exits the real world. And books actually inhabit the real world. That's why we love them, because they do inhabit our world. And so what happens when you put a book in a museum is that you have 3 processes that start. The first one is a dematerialization of the object. As soon as we cannot touch it anymore, its materiality disappears. We don't know how much it weighs. We don't know the texture of the cover. We don't know how the paper sounds, smell, etc. Books have smell, so there's kind of this process of dematerialization happens. The second process that happens is one of denarrativization. A book is something you turn the page, and the more you turn the pages, the more you get into the narrative. So if you remove the book if you put the book into the sorry. I'm easily distracted, so that doesn't work for me. So if you move the book into a position where only one page is visible, you actually break the narrative. You didn't narrativate the book. I really have to stop making up words. The last thing that happened when you kind of extract the book from its natural environment is that you decontextualize it. And that's also something that was particularly acute with the books that we were working on, because most of them were religious books, so we had to kind of think, okay, what can we and what can we not do for contextualizing or recontextualizing the books? So it's those 3 processes of dematerialization, denarrativation, and decontextualization that we wanted to challenge. We wanted to have a look at how we can change that. All right. I was going to try to do this with my phone, but that's not going to work, is it? So from the key principles that kind of guided us, the experiments, were from the literature. And so one of the first one was about congruence and meaningfulness. So by congruence, it's really about making sure that whatever we put into the space makes sense is meaningful in terms of the object itself and is coherent with the object. So, for example, we're just opening tonight an exhibition at the University of Maastricht that was done with the Faculty of Law, where we had a lot of fun because, we're working on Hugo and the law. Victor Hugo and the Law, and one of the books is on death penalty. And so, of course, there was this whole discussion about what we can put there, his drawings, etc. And one of our colleagues wanted to put the sound of a guillotine execution, so we made a soundscape of a guillotine execution, but because it was congruent and meaningful, otherwise we would not have done it. It was really something to do with making sure that it works in one go. So basically, there's research about that. We remember better through pre-existing learned multisensory association. So if you have a new association, and if it's created, it needs to be meaningful, otherwise it's counterproductive to the memorization. So that was the first principle. The second one was multisensory, at least 2 senses. That was kind of the rule that we were going with, so that it allows for sensorial preferences and contextualization, and really increases the engagement potential. So we really were aiming for more than the eye-only place that Klassen and Haas talk about. Engagement and fun, that was, we're going with Julian's principle there. We thought that it had to be fun for us, but it also had to be fun for the audience. And yeah, I think we had a lot of data, we collected a lot of data on that. And we wanted to really work with embodied experience to shift the role of the visitor from a passive recipient to an active participant. What I was telling you earlier about the biography. If you can't picture it, it's the difference between someone falling in love and someone telling you about them falling in love. That's the difference there. So you really having something that happens to you shifts really that level of engagement. And we had originally wanting to be looking at how we can stimulate the social, going from Rancière's ignorant schoolmaster idea, where we would have like an objet commun, so a common object, and that people would kind of gather around those objets communs. Spoiler, that did not work at all the way we intended, but it did something else which was also interesting. So now a bit about the context. You go ahead.
Yeah, so Emilie approached us with this idea of really trying to reactivate the multisensory aspects of book exhibitions. We were very open to this. We are a fine arts museum, but our founding bequest was essentially a big library bequest of manuscripts, printed books, and music, with paintings, and all of those aspects of the collections have grown since. Originally, we thought we might use the historic library space within the museum for the experiment, but a major collections move meant that that wasn't possible. So we ended up using what's called our medieval treasury, and in fact it was a much better place to do the experiment, because as you can see, it absolutely presents us with the glass coffin problem. It does aim to cover sort of European Middle Ages from about 1000 to 1500, not only books and manuscripts, but as you can see, paintings, ivories, textiles. So that was interesting. There were different kinds of objects there, but it's a difficult space, it's cramped, it's actually much less bright than Emilie is showing here, and we get a lot of complaints about how people can't see anything. So it was quite a good sort of ground zero for the work, really. Am I not done? Oh, yes. So, what I do in that space is, it's part of the permanent collection, but every 12 to 14 weeks we put in a different set of illuminated manuscripts and early printed books, which are meant to tell the story of book production in Europe over 500 to 600 years. Sometimes we have a particular theme, like pigments or fragments, or inspired by the British Library. I'm just about to put one in about women. But most of the time, it's a general chronological overview, and that's what we had in place for the experiment. And we also had what I'm just going to call a standard label with title, details, some explanation of what you see, and the all-important credit lines. Can I have the next slide, Emily? There were some spectacular things in there, you know, including this amazing prayer book from 13th century Paris, a royal commission, but the material is not that well served by the gallery, and we felt there was a lot we could do.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the method, what we decided to do. We did quite an extended discussion and preparation period, basically from October onwards. We kind of started discussing what we wanted to implement in late November, beginning of December. We involved multidisciplinary researchers, and we came up with 2 research questions that were core to our research. The first one was how to co-create inclusive multisensory dispositives to exhibit and reactivate illustrated books. And so really our aim was to test and co-create new multisensory dispositive with audience members, which was limited. And then we wanted to see what the impact of such multisensory dispositives were on various target audiences. So we really wanted to gather audience data. We wanted to know what it is that it does when we're doing these kinds of work. So we kind of started working on our sensory. I put both dispositive and prototype here, interesting, because I call them dispositive because, you know, and you call them prototypes, but so we kind of fight about it, but that's okay. It's the same thing. So for various audience group. So that's I'm gonna kind of take you. And so the idea was to work with 2 groups. One group would be a consultation co-creation groups, and another one would be just drop-in groups from regular visitors on the day. So we started making prototypes. Trying to cover all the different senses. So I'm going to just read out some of the stuff we did. So the smell boxes, one with incense and myrrh, one with musk, one small puffer with garden smell, samples of different parchment and leather to boost touch and smell. In terms of touch, we had reproduction, similes of books, book models, a really large, heavy book to kind of mirror the weight of one of the books. We had all the material constituting the books, leather, parchment, paper, samples of different papers, gold leaf. You can talk more about the gold leaf later. Mineral pigment that people ended up eating. Lead printmaking plate, and now you can see potential for killing your audience. Manuscript sleeve, original manuscript sleeve, modal binding. We also had illuminated initials that were painted by the conservator with gold leaf on acrylic. It was really nice, and also golden flower miniature printing, and that's when having your conservator involved is really important because they know how to do stuff that we don't. Then we did some soundscapes that were associated with the book's time, consumption, audience. So we tried some Gregorian chants, we reconstituted medieval Oxford, cloister sounds, garden sounds, and all of them were on QR codes that people could kind of scan and hear. Because we had that problem that people think it's too loud and people think it's not loud enough. So now we let them choose. Then we had some what we called augmented seeing, which were kind of electric candles to stimulate the flickering light on the gold originals and the hedgehog. Don't ask about the hedgehog. It's just last-minute inspiration. For the tasting, of course, we had planned nothing. But as I said, the pigments were eaten in the process. So this is what it looked like in the space. We tried to integrate it to an existing space. That's not an easy space. So we kind of used both the surface of the glass cases. Yeah, I keep calling them coffins, so now I don't remember the right words. The glass cases. Kind of setting up little tables, little kind of stations around the space. So that was that's what it looked like. So now, just to show you a little bit for single objects, what it was like. So for example, that object was lit with electric candle, and it was so efficient. People just spent ages just kind of going over it with the electric candle just to see it flicker. There was a soundscape that was about medieval Oxford, so the context in which the book has been produced. And I think for that book, that's all we had. But we usually had 2 senses per thing. So there was this big book that people could lift to get a sense of the weight. We had some Gregorian chants, and then people were complaining that we didn't have a sing-along thing, so, never enough. But there is this kind of will to kind of try the reading practice of the book. That was interesting to us. Here you had a smell and a soundscape around gardens. So the participatory group, as I said, we had two groups. One was a participatory group that was created from existing groups of the Fitzwilliams. And the idea was to create with them other ways of engaging. And I mean, we're still kind of dealing with all the... So we had them try out what we had prepared for them and then do a kind of a design run with us to try and design new ways of engaging. Of course, we will need a budget of about 3 million, but it will be great. But there is this kind of development of ideas that we did with the group, and also getting feedback from the group about accessibility and about all kinds of different things. The other group was a drop-in group, which was really people that just registered on the day to experience the gallery. We actually had problem having too many people wanting to go in and people not wanting to leave. We had a woman that did 3 rounds and we kicked her out for the 4th round because, come on, and she was really angry at us. She spent the whole afternoon in there, so it was really engaging and something that people really wanted. So so we did. I don't know if you maybe we will talk about if you want more details about the research method, I can give you more, but I don't think that that's the most important things. But basically, we did ethnographic observation and quick-fire interviews to gather data. So we have loads of data, which we now need to analyze. Do you want me to come in? Yeah, you go.
Yeah. So from speaking with the participatory group and observing the drop-ins and then these interviews, we've amassed, as Emilie says, a lot of data that we're now sort of sorting, segmenting, organising, and working on, sort of key observations and bigger emerging questions. So some of those sort of immediate key observations were really about the strength of people's reactions. People had very strong reactions, especially to sound and smell, which had the most very positive and very negative responses. And we wondered whether that was an issue about choice and control. The engaging with the senses had a huge impact on the pace of people's visit. So sound especially seemed to slow people down. This was sound that people could choose to listen to rather than being piped into the whole room. And it looked as if stopping and listening was promoting a kind of deeper, certainly a longer engagement with objects. And it became clear that introducing the sensory prototypes did break down established museum behaviours, but it took a while. So people are so used to not touching and not being allowed to touch that you really had to give them very explicit permission and quite a lot of persuasion that they were allowed to touch the things that we had on offer, especially because our wonderful conservator had made models of medieval manuscripts, so they looked like the real thing. So, yeah, those clear permissions were important. Emilie?
Are you not going to talk about the fact that after that we could not prevent them from touching stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Once they had taken the habit of touching stuff, then they started touching sculptures and stuff in the room that was not meant to be touched. So that's what I was telling you earlier, that once you kind of break the behavior, you need to be ready for misbehavior. That's the... You should absolutely talk about this. This is an interesting finding. So another kind of thing that we found was the sensory kind of method, the different sensory stimuli, were engaging both individual memory, so recollection, a lot of memories coming through, and at the same time imagination, so a lot of speculation of how it would be to live there at the time or how it would have felt to be in the cloister or in the garden. So the sensory approaches really seem to reinforce kind of like this connection, the sensory connection to the book. For the social bond, as I said, it's not what we found because we expected that it would create new bound between participants, but it didn't. What it did is reinforce the existing bounds. So, and we saw it particularly in the difference between the two groups. So the two groups, the first group of participants, some of them knew each other, etc. So, and they tended to stick together as a group. And with the drop-ins, people that came individually would stay individual, and people that were in groups would kind of cluster around like different activities, but it didn't create that kind of new social bond that we expected. So what we found also through the interviews is that the census created an engagement that left the visitor wanting more. More staff, more activities, more public programming, and a lot more human contacts. That's what they wanted. They wanted people to talk to about what was going on in their head and what was going on in terms of the sensory building. And correlated to this, the senses are not enough. People also wanted context and framing of the object. And again, especially discussions with real people.
So we've been thinking through some changes that we could be already making in how we're displaying this material. And one thing that I'm going to try and do is, even if you don't have sensory prototypes or dispositif in the space, try and use kind of sensory language in relation to the object to kind of stimulate the imagination and deeper engagement. It seemed very clear that choice was very important to visitors, that not everyone wants to engage in this way, so that there ought to be options to engage or not with the sensory approach. Post-pandemic, touch is still a really sensitive issue for some people, so there was quite a lot of hesitation around touching the same thing that other people have been touching. And again, it's vital that there's this coherence or congruence between the object and the prototype, and that the sensory approach is integrated into the story that you're trying to tell about the object. And then we have some bigger questions that I think will sort of drive the research forward.
So the first kind of questions that kind of came up was about the sensorium of the museum object. So if, as cultural institution, we try to recreate the sensorium of the museum object, what happens to the object itself? Because the idea is not that the book disappears from the exhibition behind all the dispositives, right? It's to actually enhance the engagement with the object. Then what does it change in terms of the behavior of the audience, and how does it impact the museum itself? Because the role of the museum changes then. And so really we're kind of looking at what does it mean for cultural institution to have a sensory approach. And yeah, so.
Another thing is that it's crucial to be aware that sensory approaches have different values in different cultural and religious contexts. So that for some visitors, touch was a really powerful means of connection, but for others it was highly problematic. You can't divorce materiality, for example, paper versus parchment, from the nature of the object itself. We had been quite excited because I have a very small collection of what we call handling objects, just some manuscript leaves, which I've used so that people can touch, feel the difference between paper and parchment. The paper leaf was a Quranic leaf. That was, of course, very problematic, and it really brought home to us that when an object enters the museum, we think it's desacralized, but not everyone agrees. You know, some of these objects still have that sacred value, so that really needs to be brought into consideration as well.
I think the worst part is that we hadn't thought about it. It really came from the participants themselves. So for us, it was also a wake-up call, kind of, okay, they're not just museum objects, they're also, they have a cultural value. So the next kind of big takeaway, big question for us is on the multisensory exhibition, affect and manipulation. Because what we saw is that a lot of what we were creating in terms of a multisensory dispositive was really stimulating historical imagination, so people could really project themselves into the history, and that we wanted to make a distinction between that and historical knowledge, so things that are actually set in stone. So for example, if I make a medieval soundscape, a soundscape of medieval Oxford, yeah, I'm trying to stimulate their imagination, but I wasn't there. So there is the difference of that's a very good tool for stimulating imagination, but it's often was taken as the real thing, which was really weird, actually. And we think it has something to do with cinema, but that's something we will. So anyway, we want to explore the affordances of multisensory dispositives on visitors' critical engagement with the exhibition content. And we were wondering how much sensory approach pose ethical problem around creating a false sense of historical authenticity, and if that's problematic or why. So that's something that we're going to work more on. And of course, I'm also really interested in problems of engagement and learning in museum. We think when we set up those dispositives that they serve a diversity of learner, but is this true? Can we actually check that? We know it activates them. That looks very promising. And as I was telling you earlier, I think there is really a transformative potential in that kind of multisensory approach that needs further diving into.
Brilliant. So our partnership continues. We're going to be presenting the research to a wide group of staff soon, so that discussions can continue. Emilie doesn't know this yet, but I've got a little project to propose to her while we're here in
it's
Riga.
People that propose to you. Probably.
Oh, exactly. Will you marry me? Yeah, that's right. We're working on a couple of journal articles together, and we will do some follow-up experiments. So I guess this is a watch this space, and would be really interested to hear your reactions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Perfect timing.
Thank you so much, but now I really do wonder about that hedgehog.
Oh, sorry, just through the hedgehog. So I'll go back then.
Yeah, shall I explain that? The hedgehog was in the medieval bestiary, so the book about animals.
Oh, there,
yeah.
sorry.
And yes, it's the one at the top, and the story is that it's an allegorical thing. The hedgehog rolls around on fallen fruit to collect its food, and then carries it to its lair on its spine. This is an allegory for the sinner who was covered all over with the prickles of sins. So the medieval allegorical imagination at work, and we had a cuddly hedgehog.
This was probably with
art,
apples
yeah.
on it, which
Anyway.
was exactly like this, and we thought it would be interesting to just put it there and see what happens. I think it was the most selfied object in the exhibition, along with the flickering candles.
Candlelight,
Yeah.
but possibly not the profoundest.
No, this one was
engagement,
really
yeah.
not, and that was the thing. This one we really just thought, it just came across. I was just like, we have to have it. But yeah, anyway, the hedgehog. So meaningless, but congruent.
We have the time for one question. Is there some comment from the audience? If not, then we can leave them for a coffee break. And once again, thank you so much, ladies.